Well, social media has certainly drawn a lot of attention this year with the presidential election and, of course, the concerns around misinformation around that process, as well as the coronavirus pandemic. And it's part of a larger concern about the tech sector, which may very well be front and center again in 2021, as Congress will most likely focus on the level of control by companies like Facebook, Amazon, and Google, and many others. Chris Messina is an expert in the tech sector, a blogger, and a speaker. And he's also credited with creating the hashtag, which obviously has had quite a bit of value on social platforms. And he joins us now to discuss the year in tech and social media and where it's headed. Chris, great to have you with us. Thanks for your time today.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me.
Before we get into the year, I have to ask how the hashtag came about, because we all use it. I use it a lot, and I'm sure it's an amazing story.
It is a pretty interesting story because it sort of harkens back to, I would say, like a more, I don't know if I want to say like innocent or pure era of like social media and the web, because I came up with the idea for the hashtag in 2007. And this was the same year that the iPhone came out. And many of us were just really starting to use our mobile phones for, sharing updates about our lives online. And I was an early user of Twitter. I was in the first 2,000 users. A bunch of my friends built the service, and we were just trying to figure out like how to make all this technology work for us. And what was happening back then was that if you followed someone, you literally get every single tweet that they posted to your phone as a text message. And that was a little bit overwhelming. And so I wanted to find a way for people to be able to essentially tag or label their tweets so that you could just subscribe to the ones that you were most interested in. And of course, there were no buttons in SMS. And so we had to come up with another way to solve that problem. And so I decided to just embed the metadata in the tweet itself as a way of giving people the ability to express what the information was about. And I wrote up a blog post, of course, and I presented this idea to the Twitter co-founders. I walked into their office back when they didn't have security. And essentially, Biz Stone, one of the co-founders, was like, you know what, Chris, that's a terribly nerdy idea. That's never going to work. And I'm sorry, but our servers are on fire. I've got to go work on that. And so just sort of dismissed it out of hand. And, I understand lots of people have crazy ideas, but I decided over the next several years to kind of, just use it myself and to see if it would work. And over time, it became something that people have used now a lot more.
So when you think back now to 2020 and you recap the year and you think about all that's gone on with tech and social media, it seems like it's a lot more negative than it is positive. Is it fair to say?
I think the media certainly is very adept at covering the negative aspects of technology. That is true.
So then how do you think that, how can you say that 2020, what kind of a year has it been for the tech sector?
I mean, I think that 2020 has been a weird year for everybody, regardless of the sector that you're in. This is the first time in the modern era that we've lived through a pandemic. And it's the first time that humans as a species have been as interconnected as we are. And so while I think that there's plenty of criticism to go around technology, we also can't, I think, ignore the way in which humans choose to use that technology. So on the one hand, you have things like Amazon delivery, you've got DoorDash, you've got Uber Eats, basically providing a mechanism to deliver food to people so they don't have to congregate. And on the other hand, you have those same underlying technologies being used to manipulate the way that people see and understand the world in increasingly polarizing ways. So to me, I guess the way I look at it is like we are in the very early stages of humanity writ large, learning to adapt ourselves to this powerful new technology that is suddenly ubiquitous at a pace that we've rarely seen technologies take over the world. I think it took radio and television each 10 to 20 years to reach saturation across the world. And what the internet does differently is that it provides every person who gets connected the ability to actually interact as opposed to just consume. And so that's a very new distribution of power. And there are a lot of people who are learning how to use that power in ways that we haven't really anticipated or built up in a very sort of coronavirus sense, the antibodies for. And I think that that's what we're experiencing.
We saw a lot of the leaders of these tech companies on Capitol Hill, or at least zooming into Capitol Hill over the course of 2020. And obviously, Congress seems to be very interested in how their operations are running. And it seems like there's going to be more and more focus by Capitol Hill on these companies as we move forward. Do you agree?
I absolutely agree. And I mean, we see it already. We've known that this is sort of coming for some time. And I think what we're really realizing or seeing is that there's a lot of power that's being taken away from the central government. And of course, governments and the state exist to kind of aggregate power and then redistribute it in various ways. And the internet changes that whole dynamic in ways that are putting many people in the general population at risk for being exposed to what I would think of as kind of information sickness. And as a result, these platforms have been built up, they've been adopted, they're used. And there's also a set of people, around the world, but in Silicon Valley, who are designing these products to get people to use them more and more. And that is predicated on the advertising and attention-based business model. So we're coming to a realization that those two things, the sort of information health and well-being of individuals, may be at odds with an extraction-based attention economy. And as a result, there needs to be some regulation that's put into place to say, okay, these things are okay and these things are not okay. And the damage that's being caused, we're just now really getting our hands around.
Is it surprising, and I don't think it is, so I'll get your thoughts on it, of the fact that seemingly it is still something that Congress has to wrap its head around, of just what, kind of the importance that tech and these companies have now and are going to have in the years ahead?
I think the real challenge is half of imagination and also half of vision. I think that the issue that Congress has is that it's sort of trying to look at things in the rearview mirror. So it may be interested in regulating Facebook in 2016, but Facebook in 2016 is not what Facebook in 2021 is going to be. And right. In addition to that, you have to imagine, well, what is the relationship that individuals should have with the technology platforms and with the players that are out there? What are the choices that people want to have, and what should they have? And is more choice in the digital realm actually as important or necessary relative to the sort of economic circumstances of the past? When it was like, do I want to buy this gasoline or that gasoline or have this cell phone provider, or like, they didn't have cell phones back then, but like, you know what I mean? Like telephony providers. And when it comes to computers, I think choice is an interesting mechanism to give people the sense of freedom. But if you're unable to understand how to compare two different services, or if you just, choose with your behavior, with your actions and where your friends are, like if you and I are in different social platforms or social networks and we can't communicate with each other, like ultimately, is that actually an effective choice? No. So I don't know that Congress is pushing forward with, let's say, interoperability. It's if I'm an AT&T customer and you're a Verizon customer, we can call each other. There's a common transport mechanism. When it comes to social media and social platforms, you run into two problems. One is the problem of interop, where both platforms support the same number of features, which we know is not necessarily true. One platform may have stickers and the other, may not. And you also have a problem of security and encryption. So if you want your communications to be private, then how do you exchange the keys that allow people to communicate between those platforms? So I just think that if Congress is coming at this and thinking this is like, Ma Bell, let's break them up and, have 100 different Facebooks, ultimately that isn't going to work unless you have a vision for how interoperability is going to work and what the meaningful choices that consumers should have actually look like.
Well, and then you have to throw in the issues around big data and obviously various levels of protection, which obviously we're seeing play out right now with the hacks that have occurred of various government agencies at this point.
Well, but we have to separate some things, right? Because on the one hand, there's advertising, and then there's tracking, and then there's also personalization. And this also falls into that realm of imagination. The fact that ads are so bad actually is a problem with data, and it's a problem of a lack of tracking. It's a problem where this is an inefficient market where advertisers are spending money to put messages in front of people who are not interested. That's actually a very poorly spent dollar. A better spent dollar is one where you're seeing ads from companies, organizations, individuals, even small businesses that are relevant to you and are relevant to your interests. Well, how does the system, the advertising platform, know to put the right things in front of you unless it learns about you somehow? Now, I'm not saying that these platforms get a blank check or whatever and access to your data, but I'm saying that that's the problem that I think is actually more interesting to solve going forward. The problem with state actors and about government hacks and all that, that feels adjacent and separate. And that has to do with the way the government procures, business, and there's these huge contracts and they're oftentimes very opaque. I've been involved in the open source community for a long time, and there are some mechanisms within the open source world to allow there to be more inspection and more almost sort of like a scientific approach to developing software, Whereas when you develop software in a closed setting or with secrets, there are those possibilities where that kind of information can, I suppose, be exploited as it was in this case with SolarWinds.
Final question for you. Obviously, as we're doing this interview, I'm at my house, you're at your house. Obviously, work from home is going to be a component that's going to be a very important element here for tech as we move forward, especially with the potential that more work from home is going to continue 2021 and well beyond that.
One of the things that I keep going back to when I try to understand what's happening in the world and what's going to happen is to really remember that, again, we're in the early innings of the internet rewriting all the rules. And so the idea of going to a workplace was very much a hybrid of the industrial era's way of finding productivity, where you literally had to be in a place where a company was providing resources to use, whether that was a typewriter or like a computer or a mainframe or a protected network. Now, the fact that we've built out connectivity, the fact that we have 4G and 5G networks, the fact that we have personal computers, mobile phones, smartphones that are more powerful than the computers that we were just using a couple of years ago, means that we can actually disaggregate work in a way that really wasn't feasible before, and that there was a lot of inertia to not do. And suddenly this pandemic comes along and sort of explodes everything and assumptions, sends everybody home because it's not safe to go to work. And we realize, oh, actually, the way that the tech world has been working for quite a while can actually apply to many, many more industries that really weren't ready to make that big leap. So that acceleration, I think, does two things. One, it opens up a lot more of the population to adopt these technologies and weave them into their lifestyles. And we will figure out probably in 2021 how to have a great balanced lifestyle between work and home and family in a way that having a 9-to-5 commute really, I think, interrupted a lot of that. Of course, there's all the stress that comes with like raising kids and co-parenting and all that stuff too. But that's one part of it. But I also think it is really important to look at how young people and children adapt or struggle with these technologies. And those create opportunities for the future. Because I think that there's a lot of kids who have grown up on video games and are used to talking to their friends remotely, but yet we still absolutely need that human experience, the fidelity and the texture of getting together and in person. And so I think for kids, it's going to be really, really important. And there's probably going to be an adjustment period to sort of reintegrate our social skills when we're able to get back together again. So on the one hand, I think it's great. It provides more choice and more flexibility, but it also comes at some costs and expenses where clearly these technologies are not available to as many people as they could be.
Chris, thanks very much for your time. All the best to you. Thank you, sir.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Chris Messina joining us.